Thank you for attending our BCF donor briefing today titled Unlock Your Philanthropic Potential. My name is Nyanka Hills, and I'm one of two donor services officers at BCF. Alexis Miller is our second donor services officer. The role of the donor services officer is to work with BCF fund holders on their philanthropic journey via assistance with opening, closing funds, assisting with grant recommendations, and providing additional account management support as requested at any time. In addition, we collaborate with BCF community investment staff to help organize, manage, and follow up on requests from fund holders for recommendations of nonprofit organizations. As we work with fund holders and their families, one new benefit that you may not be aware of is that both Alexis and I are certified in the 2164 practice. 2164 is an independent nonprofit practice developed by Sharna Goldsecker, providing multi-generational advising, facilitation, and training for next generation engagement, especially within family philanthropy and other family enterprises. If anyone is interested in either of us speaking with you on this effort for your family, please follow up with us with the email for next steps. Now, for one last note, for a question and answer on the call today, you may pose questions in the chat throughout the program, and the speakers will address them during the question and answer portion after the presentation. Feel free to unmute at that particular time to ask your question or ask it in the chat. We want to be very interactive. Now I will turn it over to Alexis Miller. Alexis.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Nyanka said, I'm Alexis Miller, and I'm the other donor services officer at BCF. We have taken your feedback about our donor updates to heart and are trying something new this time. This program is an opportunity to learn from some of our incredible fund holders about their dedication to making Baltimore an even better place to live and work. We want to highlight the amazing work of our fund holders in being thoughtful and innovative philanthropists. This is also an opportunity for those of you who have a donor advised fund with us to think about your impact, and for those who don't, a chance to learn more about these giving vehicles and how you may benefit from opening one. We are planning to continue with our educational programs while weaving in impactful projects and initiatives spearheaded by our very own BCF fund holders. And now I'm going to turn it over to Shanisha Sauls, our president and CEO.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. First, I want to just express my appreciation again to Nyanka and Alexis. You are diligent, intelligent, and enthusiastic colleagues, and you're always open to engaging our donor community, working with other team members at BCF to strengthen giving and multiplying our donor impact. So thank you. Just a couple of updates here at BCF. First, we are undergoing what we call reaccreditation. As a community foundation, we hold ourselves to very high standards, and you are a part of that community. Those standards require that we are accountable to the communities where we live, that we serve and strengthen donor intent, and that we are responsive to the regions where we reside. So a trained and experienced group of peers of community foundations from across the country are in the process of reviewing our practices across 25 domains. And we're working very hard. We expect to have this complete by the end of the year, and we will get our good housekeeping seal of approval. This is an important part of what we do and the why we do, and that we can be really proud of the way that we support and strengthen not only donor giving, but also the community that is Baltimore. So that's first. The second is next year we turn 50, which is a huge milestone, and you will be invited to celebrate with us and to mark this important occasion. So stay tuned on that, and there will be more to come. Today, as Nyanka and Alexis shared, we are spotlighting impactful and innovative practices by you, by our donors, who are using your resources to partner with community-based leaders and organizations to make a true impact in partnership with the people leading the work. We have a number of speakers with us this morning. First, Dr. Letitia Dzirasa, our Baltimore City Health Commissioner. And in case you missed it, she had a very well done piece on the front page of the Baltimore Sun that reflected her journey through medicine and to city leadership. If you haven't read it, do yourself a favor, make sure that you Google it if you don't have your son at home and take a read. Dr. Draza joined Baltimore City government as the Commissioner of Health in March 2019. She is a Hopkins-trained pediatrician who believes that equitable care is a basic right for all Baltimore City residents. Prior to joining and leading the health department, Dr. Draza worked at Fearless Solutions, a Baltimore-based digital services firm that builds custom software solutions for local and federal government clients. She served there as the Health Innovation Officer. Our next speaker is Delali Draza, who is second to his wife, and I think he also probably just calls himself Letitia's husband. Delali is the CEO and founder of Fearless, a full stack digital services firm here in Baltimore with the mission to create software with a soul, tools that empower communities to make a difference. He is also the CEO and founder of Fearless Sports, an apparel company with a mission to ignite, equip, and uniform the impactful. He's the chair of Hack Baltimore, an innovation movement that teams up technologists, civic leaders, city residents to design sustainable solutions for Baltimore's biggest challenges. I think Dr. Draza and Delali also sleep and maybe raise children, but that's pretty amazing. So they will be our first speakers. Following the Drazas, we will hear from the Baltimore Progress Fund. This is a group of donors and community partners who together came to BCF to open a fund to engage in participatory grant making back in 2019, if memory serves. The purpose of the fund was to ensure that resources are distributed equitably with input directly from the community. Representing the Baltimore Progress Fund are Terry Fitzgerald, Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility, Charlie Carter, Step Up Maryland, and Tara Huffman, who has a long career in both philanthropy, criminal justice, and social justice. Terry Fitzgerald is an anti-war activist and an opponent of the death penalty, and is a physician practicing addiction medicine in Baltimore City. Charlie Carter has been an effective force for change in Maryland politics for more than a decade. She's the founding director of Step Up Maryland and the Progressive Pipeline Projects. Tara Huffman is an attorney, nonprofit leader, and grant maker with more than 20 years of experience advancing justice and equity. Most recently, Tara was the director of criminal and juvenile justice programming at the Open Society Institute of Baltimore. So now I'm going to open up the conversation with the Drazas to discuss their personal and corporate donor advised funds at BCF. So, hello, how are you? Dr. D, Mr. D?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm great, I've been yapping for a long time, so it's your turn. All right, so I've got some questions. So first, what we find at BCF is that our fund holders and donors love Baltimore, whether they're from here or they came here. So my first question is, what made you put down roots in Baltimore?
I'll let the good doctor go first.
That is a great question. So we are both originally from Maryland. We grew up a little bit closer to the DC end, so between Prince George's County and Montgomery County. But I actually trained here. And so kind of my first, or maybe my second taste of Baltimore after going to University of Maryland, Baltimore County was during my residency at Hopkins. And I think during that time, just fell in love with the city, fell in love with the resiliency of the patients that I served, and the ability to make a difference in what is a little big city, right? Very different from, I think, DC, where we grew up. There really is, I think, an opportunity to affect change here.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. We came to Baltimore a little over a decade ago, and it very much was an experiment. We're going to come for 1 or 2 years, and we're moving back to the suburbs. Let's try it out, and got stuck in a really good way, and just fell in love with the authenticity of the city and the ability to. It's a space where if you want to make change, you want to drive impact. You kind of just roll up your sleeve and do it. And as long as you're authentic, people embrace you, they support you. And it has been a love story ever since.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the company. I am fascinated by the name, the logo, the mission. First, would love for us to learn more about why you chose the name Fearless. Yeah. Secondly, what's the significance of that logo? I mean, I feel like there's something there, something compelling and powerful. And I read a short description of what Fearless does, but in lay terms, what do you do?
Yep. So first, the name, Fearless. I felt like I had plenty of great mentors over the years, and I'd been prepped to start this business for years. But even with all that training preparation, I was still terrified, right, when it came time to actually jump. And so the first thing was, you have a name, a company called Fearless. There's only but too scared you can be every day saying it and kind of living in that. So it was a reminder to us to really just embrace the change we wanted to make and to do it in a very fearless way. So it's a very personal name from that regard. When you talk about our logo mark that you'll see that represents us, it's really two, see, it's a little version here, right? It's two mirrored Fs, right? And those Fs are significant. There's one that is facing backwards, and the one that's facing backwards is really a reminder of our past, our history, right? Where we've come from, right? When we think about whether it be technology or just our personal lives, we all have a story, right? That's behind us. The one that's facing forward really is talking about this future, right? And this vision of where we want society to go, where we want the world to move to in general. And the gap that's kind of in the middle between those two is really about the journey and the moment that you take, right? These decisions that you're able to make over time, and how Fearless will walk you through this process from wherever you are, wherever you're going. We want to partner with people along this transformation journey. Now, the company that you mentioned, we build software with the soul, right? And what that really means is, in this world that we see where good software powers things that matter, Dr. D talked about it a little earlier, right? And all the amazing work they're doing in the health department. But the technology that powers, Facebook and all the apps on your phone, right? All the technology that you see, self-driving cars, is not the same technology that often powers things like healthcare, things like education, things like social justice, things like these really meaty issues that exist, that need some advancement and need some technology underpinning them. And so we really exist to be that, to fill that gap in that space and really help those industries transform.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, now we'd like to hear more about your giving. What made you choose BCF or your personal and corporate donor advice funds?
Am I up again?
Yeah, you are. You are. You grab the first one. I'll grab the Fearless one.
Sure. I mean, I think, BCF has a reputation for being transparent and accountable, but I think also such a strong commitment and tie to the community. And that was extremely important for us when we thought about where we wanted to, place our funds for donation.
Yeah, I think I saw Byron on the call a little earlier, but very, very trusted friend and advisor. I mean, it really just speaks to the reputation of BCF, highly thought about and respected within the community. And so we were trying to figure out what our philanthropy strategy would be, both corporately and personally, and talked to Byron, and he heavily recommended BCF. I was like, what's a donor advised fund? And he explained the whole thing and connected us in. It's been amazing. Though giving is something that's been always on our mind and things that we do, BCF brings so much value into the conversation, into the equation. In addition to being an amazing administrative arm, it's so much more than that, right? So for us, the ability to say, we don't know where to give, we care about these types of things, whether it be STEM or student-based issues, to be able to have an advisor and a partner to be able to say, here are the types of organizations that are making impact in the city, has really been a tremendous value add to us. And so we set up one. I think we may have set the business one up first, and then did a personal one very, very, very soon after, and wanted to make sure that we were centralized with our giving. And so we really see this as a long-term partnership in how we are looking to impact Baltimore.
Great, wonderful. So tell us how you use your funds, what organizations and funding areas you support, and what's different about the two funds in terms of strategy for grant making.
Yeah, I think Delali touched on this a bit, right? So there's certainly a passion I think we have for STEM and for tech because of our backgrounds, but I think also for just investing in organizations that support children in the community. I know I also have and I think we both have a strong affiliation with our alma mater at UMBC. And so recognizing that, because of our time there, it really helped to propel us to where we are. So certainly giving back to UMBC, as well as my medical school alma mater, Meharry Medical College. So those are important to us.
Yeah, and on the business side, we are really looking to align really around two strategies, right? That there is one that really underpins our community strategy, which are, how do we find and support organizations that really have a STEM-based focus. And so it might be organizations like Code in Schools. It might be organizations such as Debt Education, right? So things that are helping to build this tech ecosystem in which we envision within Baltimore as a whole, and creating opportunities in that space. And so that's a direct line there. And then there's another part of our philanthropy, which is just let's support just good initiatives, period, right? They may not have a tech focus, and that's fine. But things that we think are really important and moving like the social needle here in Baltimore. And so we've supported organizations like the Community Mediation Center, as well as Parity Homes, and organizations like that. They're just doing tremendous work, and they don't necessarily need us. They just need a little bit of fuel to continue to further their work. And so we're happy to partner them in that way. It's truly just a two-pronged approach from the business perspective.
Wonderful. So what we're finding here at BCF, and Nayaka and Alexis can speak to this specifically, is that the world has changed, and giving and grant making has changed. And the requests that we're getting from our fund holders and donors have a distinct set of flavors. If I remember correctly, I think you opened your funds in 2019 in the world before. Has anything changed about your grant making in the last 2 years? And if so, what and why? And if not, why? Why did you decide to stay the course?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that things have changed yet, but we're in the process of talking through that, at least on the corporate side, and how we become a better partner to Baltimore in general. And so there are initiatives that we've looked at. Again, I mentioned a little bit in the STEM space, but with this new reality, we're seeing so much in the digital divide. And so being able to target more resources towards organizations that are supporting the digital divide, and whether it be internet access, device access, has become increasingly important. And I think COVID has really helped to shed more light on an issue that's been here for a long, long time, right? So I think in those cases, there's a way for us to be a bit more strategic in how we provide our giving. I think there's other things that we're thinking about, which is, COVID has really opened up a bit of the global economy in a way that we hadn't seen before. Tech has always been one of those things in which you've got, laptop and internet connection, you're able to contribute all over the place. But it's really showing us that a lot of industries can play that way, right? A lot of industries can. And so now we've got employers that are looking at Baltimore, looking across, the country, across the world in a way they hadn't before. So there's opportunities to potentially support job readiness, workforce development based initiatives. And so we're thinking through what all of those things look like, and creating, additional pipelines in a way that was different than before.
All right, so that concludes my questions. My understanding is that I'm going to turn this over to Terry to talk about the Baltimore Progress Fund. And then Nayaka is going to take the reins and open it up to everyone to ask their own questions. So thank you two so much. I know you're very, very busy, and we really appreciate the time, the insights. It means a lot to us. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So I am Terry Fitzgerald. I'm a physician practicing addiction medicine, as mentioned before. I'm on the steering committee of Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility, and a founding member of the Baltimore Progress Fund, building on shared roots. I want to give a little of the original history. In May of 2019, 15 current and former Baltimore residents who hold the city in their hearts and want to see its people prosper came together for the purpose of supporting those in the community who are working for positive change in our city. Recognizing that there are many who grew up in Baltimore and have moved away, yet still feel a commitment to the welfare of the city, we wanted to be able to reach out to these Baltimoreans in spirit and offer them an opportunity to promote positive structural change in Baltimore. In that very first meeting, we recognized that one, we must seek to fund groups that are rooted in low-income communities, especially communities of color. We want to focus on groups that are working for systemic change, correcting the power relations that exist in our city. And three, we should not think that we as donors can alone determine what needs to be funded. The community must be included in the decision-making process. This understanding developed a great deal over the coming year. These ideas were the beginning of the Baltimore Progress Fund. During 2019, we studied philanthropic structures and power dynamics and the history of outsiders deciding what the problems are and how to address them, while ignoring those in the affected community who understand the problems quite well and have often been working for years to develop the system to address these problems. Even progressive donors tend to develop the same power relationship that they believe they are trying to overturn. This led us to the study of participatory grant making, in which the leaders of the communities being funded become decision makers about funding, including the strategy and criteria behind those decisions. We were recognizing the need not only to change the power structure around us, but the structure of philanthropy itself. In order to realize this idea of participatory grant making, we began to reach out to known, trusted community activists with a broad view and a grassroots base. On January 9 of 2020, 6 donors, 9 community activists, assisted by 4 facilitators and advisors, met to begin developing the Baltimore Progress Fund. Together, we worked to clarify our vision and the structure of the organization. By early 2020, we had created a board of 10 to guide this work. 4 from the funding community, 4 activists who lead groups working for positive change in Baltimore, and 2 who have years of experience in the nonprofit field, but are not currently directing such organizations. The board works on a consensus basis, and each person has an equal say. We raised $175,000 for an initial round of grant making, and we chose to structure the organization as a donor-advised fund housed at the Baltimore Community Foundation. A very important step in this process was the development of our community norms, the principles by which we function as an organization. This was a process that involved respectful struggle and debate. These community norms are: 1, we are committed to an alternative participatory process and way for our philanthropy to identify applicants and solicit proposals and invest funds. Pardon me, that's the life of cold. 2, all members of BPF have 1 vote. We are all giving of our community intellectual, social, and financial capital. 3, funders commit to a compensatory justice and reparations frame, including finding ways to share social and financial capital. 4, decisions will be made by a consensus process. Each person may vote yes, no, or block. If all present vote yes, then the proposal is approved. Any person can block a proposal. It is expected that a person who blocks a proposal will suggest changes that will make the proposal acceptable. A discussion will follow with the intent to resolve the differences. If the differences are not resolved and the block remains, then the proposal is tabled. And thirdly, a person can vote no to express an objection to a proposal, but not strong enough objection to block it altogether. The rest of the group will consider changes to resolve the objection of the no voter. 5 of the norms. We are a learning space promoting brave dialogue free from ridicule. 6, members strive for 80% meeting attendance and 2/3 of the members must be present for decisions. And 7, important decisions must be discussed at 2 meetings before being finalized. I hope that presentation is not too tedious, but it's important to understand that this structure does seek to create equality and true participatory grant making. It should be noted from the very beginning, the Baltimore Community Foundation has played a very important role by facilitating our discussions and advising us on process. Since May of 2020, this part has been played by Tiffany July Lindo. Without her support, we may never have come this far. Now I want to pass it on to Charlie Carter.
Thank you, Terry. I think there's a couple of things that to emphasize what Terry talked about, and that is that we recognize that as in part of our discussions, what surfaced was that oftentimes there are organizations in the community who are doing the work, but that they struggle to get the recognition of funders, and that historically there are.
Hi, this is Chris Walworth, General Counsel for Audacious Inquiry. I'm unavailable at the moment, but if you leave your name and number and a brief message, I'll return the call as soon as I'm able.
that historically there are some groups who have established relationships with funders, and that they always seem to get funded, while other groups who are doing great work tend to be overlooked. And so we wanted to make sure that we were looking deep in the community when we decided to seek out folks to apply for the grants. Also, it's worth noting that, as Terry noted, that the steering committee of the Baltimore Progressive Fund is made up of community activists and like myself, advisors like Tara, and funders like Terry. To get the community partners recognize that if we wanted to change the way funding was done in Baltimore, that we needed to walk the walk. And so we decided that while we were crafting this RFP, that none of the community partners would apply for those funds, because that would be a case of us having relationships and using those relationships to better position our organizations to get the money. And we didn't want to do that. We really wanted to focus on groups that are overlooked. We spent several months defining what our group meant by structural change. As you might imagine, there are several different definitions of this. We rejected the idea that structural change was just policy solutions and working to change government. We wanted to consider groups that we wanted to take leadership or direction of what was structural change from the groups that were actually closest to the problem and doing the work on the ground. We came up with a general guideline that structural change for that first round was shifting power from areas of concentration to those who had less power. With that in mind, we went ahead to craft an RFP that we believed would be accessible to smaller organizations. So we didn't want to require a great deal of writing or detailed documents. We wanted to start the conversation with them by asking them to provide an overview of their organization and their program, a budget, and an interview with a small group of BPF partners. The selection criteria that we established included having a threshold of BIPOC representation in the leadership, staffing, and membership of those groups. The proposal review process paired a funder with a community leader or an organization leader to allow for different perspectives in reviewing the proposals. Honoring the varied perspectives proved pivotal. In the end, one example was that we got a proposal from one organization that on its surface really didn't look like it met the criteria of structural change, but the community leaders had worked with this person and understood that what they were actually doing was different than what they were presenting in the proposal, and that we actually ended up were able to go back to that applicant and talk to them about really addressing in the proposal their intention to create the structural change in allowing Black and brown farmers, urban farmers in the city to gain access to federal money. In the end, there were 29 proposals were submitted. We reviewed them. 5 were considered, and awards were made to 3 very different organizations, each one tackling structural change in a different way. We have changing how Black urban growers gain access to federal money, changing the control of commercial corridors within low-income communities, and changing Baltimore City government's process for budgeting and how to allow more priority setting. I will stop there and pass it over to Tara, who is going to talk about our lessons learned.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Terry and Charlie. Thank you, Shanesha and the fund for this invitation. So some lessons learned. First lesson is that if you're going to create a participatory grant making process, if you're going to build a table that includes funders, that includes folks who are embedded deeply in the community and maybe some other advisors who can bridge the two, just know that that process is going to take a lot longer than you think it is, because you're building something that's very different. You're building something where the power dynamics are being thrown on their head. You're building something where people are coming in community and having really deep, honest, transparent conversations. And you're also building something where you're building trust at the same time. And so it took a lot longer than we anticipated. And it was worth all of the energy and the time. But each person had to learn. First, they had to decide and then be willing to lean into and work through tensions. And there were tensions. We've had some pretty intense conversations. We've had meetings where folks were really fundamentally disagreeing with each other, but instead of walking away from the table, folks stayed right there. They gained a greater interest, greater understanding of the person's interest, motivations, ultimate goals. And in doing that, we were able to work, as Terry said, to a place of consensus, or to at least a place where the person says, I'm still not totally satisfied with this outcome, but I'm not going to block it, and I'm willing to continue to work towards that. And in doing that, there has to be a willingness to also extend grace to your partner as you're building a closer relationship with them, extending the benefit of the doubt and allowing time to pass so that we can mutually build some trust among one another. So that was the first lesson learned. The second lesson learned, and Charlie alluded to this, is that when you invite community to the table, the community partners opted not to apply directly to the fund. That is a conversation that they had amongst themselves, and then they brought it to a meeting and to sort of the surprise of the funders. But eventually we did recognize that far too often, folks who are in the community, grassroots activists, they're asked to give their time and their expertise with no compensation whatsoever. And so even though they chose not to apply directly to the fund, the group also determined that there needed to be some way to compensate them for their time. And so each of our community partners did receive a stipend. And we will continue to work through how we, whether we just continue to renew that stipend from year to year as they continue to participate in the process, or if there's another way that we can continue to compensate them for their time and for their energy. But it should be that, they're providing a lot of emotional labor, they're providing a lot of physical labor, and that needs to be recognized and compensated in some form or fashion. Another lesson that we learned, particularly when we after we had drafted the RFP and released it into the community, is that If you are initiating or managing a project that deliberately targets groups who are embedded in the community, you need to be prepared to do some real intentional outreach to make sure that those groups are aware of this opportunity, to make sure that they see themselves in this opportunity, they understand what the opportunity is, and they're willing to apply. We had a slow trickle of RFPs in, and we recognized that we had to do some more intentional outreach because, as Charlie said, and as Terry said, these are groups that do not historically have relationships with the funding community. They have not yet had the opportunity to build up the skill set and the capacity to engage with Baltimore's philanthropic community in this fashion. They're not looking at BCF's job grants board. They may not be on the listservs that you're sending out the RFP to. There's just a real disconnect. And so if you want to get funding to these community partners, or at the very least, if you want to invite them to consider the opportunity to see if there is some alignment between what you want the fund to do and what they are capable of doing, you have to build in the time and the energy to do more intentional outreach. You can't just post it on a website and send it out across a couple of listservs. Basically, your outreach is going to have to be more energetic than that in order to sort of get a really good response. Another lesson we learned is that, we don't all have the same definition or understanding of what we mean by structural reform. So time is needed to develop a shared understanding of whatever it is you're trying to get at. And then once you come to a shared understanding, remain true to it with some flexibility. Like, no, we want to support structural change. We've had a discussion, okay, our definition of structural change needs to be broader. It doesn't need to be just rested in policy. It actually needs to be rested in structurally changing other systems and ecosystems that can either serve justice and equity or that are acting as a barrier to justice and equity. And so to hold true to the, yes, that's what we want to do, but have some flexibility in terms of what that might look like. Because you may have an idea of what that looks like, but then someone can bring you something and cause you to have a different understanding of what it will take and what it can take to get to structural change. And then the last thing I'll share, because I do want to leave enough time for questions, is that there is indeed incredible wisdom among the folks who are embedded in the community. And therefore, trust the community cannot just become a woke tagline that we say, but then we don't act upon. It has to be practiced in real time. Again, to Charlie, I believe is the one who eliminated the example that there was someone who submitted an application, and on the face of the application, it did not look like it was aligned whatsoever with the goals of the Baltimore Progress Fund. But because we had a community partner sitting at the table who was intimately familiar with this particular project, they were able to say, okay, it's just this person doesn't know how to express what it is they're doing in writing. Like, our application made it a little difficult for them to express what it is that they're doing, but I know what they're doing. And so let us explain to you what's really going on. That community, that we ended up making a grant to that project, and that project was just highlighted in the Baltimore Sun for the way that they are totally changing the game for urban farming, and how urban farmers are able to build capacity and get compensated for their work. And without the community, and I'm a funder too, I too was looking at this application like, this doesn't look like structural change. And so if it had been all funders at the table, that applicant likely would not have received the funding. But because we had folks embedded in the community at the table, we extended trust to them, right? That's why we invited the community to the table in the first place. We wanted to be in partnership. We didn't want to be the ones, and I'm using my funder hat because I came to the table as a funder. We didn't want to be the ones just driving all the decisions. And so we trusted our community partners that this is a vehicle to getting us to where we want to go, which is seeing more structural change in Baltimore and we made a really great decision. And it was because we truly wanted this to be a participatory grant making process. It's not easy, easier said than done, requires a lot of energy, requires quite a bit of humility, and above all, requires you giving up some power so that we can get to a better decision that is held by a community of folks, including folks that may not look like you, think like you, talk like you. And so I'm very happy to be part of this process. I'm looking forward to the future of the Baltimore Progress Fund